know. Nothing else like her anywhere you go. A man, she's anything but calm. A regular pint-sized atom bomb. Atom bomb, baby, little atom bomb. I want her in my wigwam.
Talk about whistling past the graveyard. Yes, we are going to talk about Catherine Bigelow's new sort of nuclear strike movie, I guess. But let me tell you, it's The Nose, and we're very excited. We have three of our Nose panelists in the studio today. One of them is remote from New Haven. Here for the first segment, we have Jim Chapdelaine, Emmy-winning musician and patient advocate for people with rare cancers and political troublemaker. I'm trying to think of a better description for what you're doing, but it's about right.
That's the most accurate.
Right.
Trouble.
Irene Papoulis, who wrote a short textbook called The Essays Only You Can Write. Brian Slattery is a journalist and musician. And we're going to talk about House of Dynamite. It's the 11th movie directed by Catherine Bigelow. Certainly the first one to go direct to Netflix. It's written by Noah Oppenheim. And it is about it's about an imminent nuclear strike on the U.S. That sort of turns up on the radar, so to speak. I'm sure they use something much more complicated than radar at this point. And it's not clear what the origin is, but you're watching government react to it. We'll hear a little bit of it. You're going to hear some of the people from the all-star cast. You'll hear Tracy Letts as General Anthony Brady, Anthony Ramos, Major Daniel Gonzalez, Amina Nieves as Sergeant Mary Nolan, Malachi Beasley as SCPO William Davis, Rebecca Ferguson as Captain Olivia Walker, and somebody who playing Admiral Brendel, and we don't know who that is. Anyway, here we go, A1.
Approximately 3 minutes ago, we detected an ICBM over the Pacific. At this time, we haven't determined if the launch was land or sea-based, but the object's trajectory is consistent with previous tests, and we expect splashdown somewhere in the Sea of Japan.
What is it, Sergeant?
Clear radar acquired our object, sir.
Wait, and?
Rate of ascent slowing. Inclination is flattening.
Velocity?
It's steady, sir. 6 kilometers per second.
Wait, is Cheyenne Mountain seeing this? Think you better get back on?
Yep.
Sorry about that. Seems we have an update. Current velocity indicates that the object will go suborbital. Current flight trajectory is consistent with impact somewhere in the continental United States.
What's your level of confidence on that, Tony?
It's not an error. We're tracking it on multiple radar systems now.
I'm told hi, Jerry. We have dual phenomenology on the track. 19 minutes to impact.
I think it's cool that they use dual phenomenology as a term. So before we talk about this, I'm just going to sort of say that we can talk a little bit about the unusual structure of this. What actually happens at the end, I think maybe we should probably deprive the listeners of knowing about because they don't want it spoiled. But so Brian Slattery, maybe get us going. Just in general, talk about how you reacted to this.
Yeah, I sort of saw this as the sort of like fail-safe of our time. That's the 1964 movie. That's sort of like the serious version of Dr. Strangelove. And it sort of had a great way of showing how the global nuclear situation has changed pretty dramatically since the Cold War. There was, to me, it sort of pointed out that there was something oddly sort of reassuring during the Cold War about the idea that there were just two powers that were sort of locked in this tense dynamic of mutually assured destruction. And now that that's gone, there's actually more there's more nuclear powers and fewer ways of accounting for all of them. And the chaos is in its way. I think when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was this idea of, oh, maybe we don't have to worry about this anymore. And it turns out we have to just worry about it all in a whole new way. That's a lot harder to keep track of. And that really like tests the ability of our bureaucratic systems to keep up with something like that. And there was something that was the second piece of it that I really enjoyed, is that the structure of it, which I'm assuming we're going to talk about, struck me as a really interesting way to show how we have a lot of trained professionals who are supposed to be dealing with this kind of catastrophe, but in some ways it's really unfair to expect any kind of system that's kind of built on a series of checks and balances and dotting I's and crossing T's to then deal with something that moves as fast and has as huge stakes as something like a nuclear assault.
Yeah, Irina, essentially there's a few little kind of domestic preludes, but we're ultimately experiencing the same 18 minutes from three different sets of perspectives. And I don't know, how did that work for you? How did that work as a storytelling device?
Fantastic. I loved the emphasis on the fact that these are people. These are people with normal lives. They have things going on, and we saw some of the things they had going on, even in those little 18-minute things. We knew a lot about them beyond their behavior in those 18 minutes, and that's what made it all the more, including the president, and it made it all the more poignant to sort of say, wow, these are the people that are in charge. These are the people whose lives, who for whom our lives are at stake, and they're regular people just like us. They're committed. They have morality. They believe in their jobs, or at least in this movie they do. But they also have lives, and they're fallible, and they're trying, and it's something else to worry about that that I feel like I haven't. I used to be involved in the nuclear freeze in the 80s and everything, and then it just kind of like we haven't been talking about it that much, but we need to talk about it. So I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, this movie kind of subverts some of the thrillers that we watch, where these highly competent people, can figure out a situation. This is a little bit more like you're in the delivery room with your obstetrician, and he's going, I don't know, C-segment, or should we just do it I can't really, I don't. You sort of feel like
you're literally referencing a scene from the movie now.
It's like the I don't know part of this, I think, is kind of terrifying.
Hope it works.
I think if there was that show 24 Hours for a while, this should be called 24 Minutes.
Yeah.
And I love the way they did it. And to Irene's point, I love the way they humanized the people. They made them, you got to see that a little bit of their lives, and then they had to go do stuff that was beyond their humanity in this thing. And I will add this. It's a very tense movie. The second thing we're going to talk about is a very tense series, and neither of them made me as anxious as The Bear, which is about a restaurant.
Totally with
It's
you,
almost
100%.
unwatchable.
The Bear is the most
Like
anxiety-provoking
nuclear
series.
holocaust couldn't hit The Bear level.
But if they
anxiety.
lose that health code license, that's a much bigger problem, I think. Yeah, I don't know, Brian, tell me a little bit more about how you reacted to this structure, to this way of kind of repeating the same 18 minutes.
I think that, I tend to like things like this. Like to pick a weird example, like Run Lola Run is one of my favorite movies, which totally does the same kind of thing. But like in this case, it was interesting because it did it 3 times. The first 2 perspectives have a lot of overlap between them. And it was to me, it struck me as a real test of Catherine Bigelow's direction to be able to make the second segment as sort of gripping as the first one, because we were getting a lot of the same information again. And during the second one, I was thinking to myself, well, okay, we probably most savvy media watchers now know like how this thing is going to go. And also, I was kind of worried that the third segment was going to be sort of even more boring. Like I had thought of like, what if it's really about the first segment? But it turns out, I don't want to spoil anything, but it turns out that the third segment is that it becomes more of a departure, and it's really where everything sort of gets tied together. And what we've been talking about, that's the sort of like gross unfairness of asking people to deal with a situation like this, like really comes into very, very sharp focus. And like the failure of a bureaucratic system, the failure of people, and the sort of unrealistic expectations we have that we can expect better in some ways.
I've been finding myself, Irene, thinking lately, not just in connection with this, but just generally that, and I'm talking to the English professor here, that it's time for a W.H. Auden comeback. And Auden has this one poem called Musée Beaux-Arts, where he begins, it's sort of about when something really momentous is happening. Most of the people are not paying attention. It begins, about suffering they were never wrong, the old masters, how well they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. And part of the pathos of this thing is that there are all these people. Like at one point, I think the president's motorcade is like whipping around some corner because the president's got to get to someplace, and there are people like trying to get selfies and stuff. There is some pathos to the fact that 99% of America has no idea what's happening.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that poem is a great companion piece to this, but along with it, though, it's not, it's the protocol. I sort of respected the fact that there is a whole protocol in place that they learned. Even though they learned it, they didn't have it in the front of their minds. So there was like a sort of like an intelligent idea about, okay, what are we going to do in this kind of situation? People have thought about it. Lots of people have planned out the strategy, taught it to all these other people. Which is how a lot of things work. I mean, like medicine, people don't just decide what to do. They know the protocol they've been trained by. And so here there was the protocol, but it was sort of like all interspersed with morality and what's right and how about my life and how about my people and so it was just so scary. Yeah, like so it's the vulnerability of the people, but it's also the vulnerability of the system of what to do, and it's also unspeakable. I mean, we're the only country that ever actually used a bomb. That was something I was thinking about too. And how is this going to go in Japan? People watching this after that. It's just anyway. It's like it's unspeakable, but it's something that happens, and we have to deal with it.
Well, yeah, and Jim, partly because of some of your recent political activity, the whole Chapter Lane 2028 thing. I mean, it's just getting rolling here right now. But
I haven't declared.
You haven't declared, and you possibly have nominated. You will not run. Who knows? But I mean, there is like a really fundamentally interesting moral question, as Irene says, and it's unfortunately kind of thwarted by a kind of known unknown, because one of the big questions is, do you retaliate so that while you have time to retaliate, so that you are not kind of the losers? And there's a maleness quality to this too. They did this, we got to do it. And then there's another set of voices, particularly I think led by the character played by Gabriel Basso, saying no, because we don't know who did this. And we've got time to wiggle some pins back into some grenades, maybe, unless I'm wrong. But it's I don't think I'd ever seen that expressed so clearly with, of course, no resolution whatsoever.
I think part of that is the way they really were. She's really brilliant in the way she contrasts the military response versus the civilian response, and it's mostly the electeds and their staff that have, I think they all feel ambiguous about it, but the military is ready to do their job. And I also thought, like, no matter what happens to us, our fate will be decided by a 3-ring binder.
Yeah, that is a little alarming, At least it's nicely laminated.
Like
though.
something you had printed at Staples.
Yeah, it looks like if you spilled something on it, you could just wipe it right off.
You could still get a plan.
Still see all the weapons in there. So, Brian, let me just try this out on you. I didn't like Bigelow's movie Zero Dark 30 when I saw it. And I think I didn't like it because it really failed to have a point of view about some things that I thought were important to have a point of view about. Yeah. But watching this and seeing a little bit of her own commentary about it, I realized she wants us to make up our own minds about a whole bunch of things, that in some ways part of her technique is an absence of a very specific auteur type of point of view. And I think that might be kind of a strength of this thing too, that 12 people could watch this and come to 12 at least slightly different sets of conclusions about it.
Yeah, I mean, going off of what Jim was just saying, I mean, the thing that I appreciated was the idea that we had some really dramatically conflicting viewpoints in here. And I think that she did a great job of not, putting her thumb on the scale of who has like the answer, which is why it kind of struck me again and again as being a story about like, someone who thinks they have an easy answer to this. It's like, are you kidding? It's like it's almost impossible. And like, there's somebody for myself, I found myself going, well, that makes sense. Then someone would say the opposite thing, and I'd say, well, that makes sense. And it's one of those things where then if you're the president, you start to understand why you have that expression that people tend to agree with the last person they talk to. And it's they all do kind of make sense, and there's no easy answer, and there's no the idea that you can come up with an easy right or wrong is something that's fun for social media, but doesn't tend to work in reality very well.
I mean, but I would say there is an easy right or wrong in the sense that like it's just insane for us to have all these weapons sitting there that could annihilate everybody. And so in a way, I feel like what she wants is for us to talk about that and say, can we do something about that? Because there is no, there's no such thing as an answer that anyone could come up with.
Wasn't
right?
it surrender or suicide at one point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's basically the two choices you would have.
Yeah, I think that's said by this young character, Jake Barrington,
Right.
played by Gabrielle Basso, who was playing a similar role in The Night Agent. And this might wreck it for you, also played J.D. Vance in Hillbilly Elegy.
I'm sorry I missed that.
Well, he needed the job. He was just
He
getting
had the
started.
right face that sort of looks like him.
Okay, I'll just throw this out to all of you, and anybody can just jump in. Did anybody else at some point go, oh, Pete Hegseth would be doing that? I think we sort of need to talk about that, just generally speaking.
We just reached bear level anxiety. I'm back in the bear.
Yeah.
Because here, yeah, go ahead.
I will say that what I appreciated about this is that they made everybody smart and competent. That's not a thing we've come to expect of our public officials lately, but it was really nice to see a movie that was about that, where that was the underlying premise, is that people are good at their jobs and trying to do them well.
Trying to do them well.
I've also read where the current administration is now reviewing the entire nuclear program based on having seen this movie.
Well, first of all, as we now know, Trump did announce he wants to resume nuclear testing, and they did respond. The Department of Defense responded specifically to this movie, saying, "Oh, that's not true. Our stuff all works."
Which makes you wonder what else we could make a movie about.
Yeah.
That might move the needle on something else. I don't know.
Well, it doesn't, though. They just say, I mean, this isn't like a big spoiler or anything like that, but the second segment, I think, is called Trying to Hit a Bullet with a Bullet. And it turns out it's really hard to hit a bullet with a bullet, and that thing doesn't work. And their position is it would work. But we're still taking that on faith.
Just take their word for
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I'd also like to, we've sort of done a pretty good, I mean, I don't know whether the fact that a certain person plays the president of the United States is a big reveal, except that the thing goes for like 75 minutes before you see the president of the United States and see who's playing.
I was
it.
surprised.
You were surprised? Okay, good.
Yeah.
So we're not going to say that. But I do want to say, and I think Pants put it really well, this is a movie where kind of everybody's underused, or it's like Wes Anderson stunt casting or something. I mean, Caitlin Dever, who, starred in one movie and has played all kinds of, really major roles in other things, is the Secretary of Defense's daughter, and you see her she's got a line and a half, maybe,
Right.
which may be more lines than she had actually in No One Will Save You, where basically nobody speaks. But I mean, there's sort of like, it's kind of interesting. There are all these kind of high profile prestige actors, and the implication is nobody's going to be that important in this situation.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and there are a lot of people that are going to be doing something here, and they're all just churning around, and it's not really about any one person. The movie isn't about any. Like who's the protagonist? There's about 6 or 7 of them, and some of them only have really short time. So I'm just agreeing with you that it kind of adds to the feeling of, wait, what about her life? Wait, what's going to happen with them? What's going on? And then you're just, and that's kind of the pace of the movie.
Absolutely. Did anybody have a performance that kind of jumped out of them a little bit? Yeah, go ahead.
I thought the woman running the
Rebecca Ferguson?
Yeah, she was great.
She got out of her silo.
And I like the way they jumped right into all this jargon that none of us really know, but that you get it because they infer it upon you.
Almost everybody who's working for America in this situation, from an acting point of view, is from another country. Rebecca Ferguson is Swedish, and several major British actors are in this. And Jason Clarke, who plays some admiral, is Australian. I liked Rebecca Ferguson. I mean, I've seen her in Mission Impossible and stuff like that, but this is a different kind of performance. I really dug it. Slattery, anybody jump out at you?
I wish I could remember this guy's name, but the guy from Chernobyl, who plays the Secretary of State.
Jared Harris. Jared Harris.
He's Swedish, isn't he?
He's not. He's Richard Harris's son.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Anyway, perhaps because I liked him so much in Chernobyl, as soon as he arrived, I was expecting him to do something interesting, and he did.
Yeah, he did. He did several very interesting things.
Yes, he did.
Well, all right, we should probably wrap this up. But I think we're all in favor of watching this. Although people should understand,
Thumbs up.
But it's not as bad as it sounds, though, because there's a lot of human interest. It's not torture to watch.
Right.
Oh no.
But it's not relaxing either.
It's not
But
relaxing.
I don't think you're saying global thermal nuclear warfare is not as bad as it sounds.
Yeah.
You're talking about the movie.
We'll publish on the website a list of legal things that you can eat or drink while you're watching this that might either help or really make
Ayahuasca
it
be
way worse. Yeah,
top of the list.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks very much for this conversation, and I think Mr. Slattery will be coming back at the end to make some recommendations. We're going to take a break. We're going to add Bill Usman. We're going to talk about Task.
Supersonic, what a joke. I'm done. See ya. Don't wanna be a lunch meat. Pot scum. My head's on fire. High steam. I'd rather be anywhere. Doing anything. Yeah. I'd rather be
So we're back. I'm going to break my own rule now. Jason Tatum has grabbed his leg. He's limping to the bench, and they're bringing into the game a new substitute. Bill Usman is joining us, professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University, taking over Brian Slattery's spot. Irene Papoulis is still with us. Jim Chapdelaine is still with us. Task is a 7-part limited series written and created by Brad Inglesby, who also created Mayor of Easttown. Very similar kind of vibe to both of these. Here's HBO's logline. In the working class suburbs of Philadelphia, an FBI agent heads a task force assembled to put an end to a string of violent robberies led by an unsuspecting family man. I don't think that's a very good description at all, actually. But the FBI agent leading the task force is played by Mark Ruffalo. Let's hear a little bit from this. You're going to hear Mark Ruffalo and the wonderful Martha Plimpton as his boss, Kathleen McGinty, also of the FBI.
There's been a spate of home invasions in Montco and Delco counties. 2, sometimes 3-man crew, middle of the night. They're targeting drug houses. Through DEA informants, we know of at least 9 houses that have been hit. And of those 9, 7 belong to members of a motorcycle gang, the Dark Hearts. You ever run across them?
I brush with them at violent crimes.
They just found 2 bodies last week behind a concrete plant in Ridley. They're low-level distributors, but the Dark Hearts are retaliating.
Blaming other gangs?
They're spinning. We need to find this crew before a turf war escalates.
How long you need me?
Budgeted for 4 weeks, but Maria hired a team.
It's not exactly a wealth of experience, Cass.
No, it's task, Tom. You know, we're not talking the tip of the spear here.
I just want to go on record as saying if they wanted to make a spin-off series about Martha Plimpton's character, Kathleen McGinty, in retirement, she's about to retire, and she's in retirement, and she's wearing kind of sweats all day long, but she winds up solving crimes too. And I also want to just share one great Kathleen McGinty line. She says at one point, she goes, "I'm supposed to give a press conference at 2 p.m., and I prefer not to stand up there looking like a smacked ass." just thought that was so great. So, Bill, since you're fresh off the bench, you got fresh legs here. Just talk a little bit about how you reacted to this series.
You just made radio history by comparing me to Jason Tatum. That's trust me.
No, I'm comparing you to the guy who goes in for Jason Tatum.
Oh,
in this analogy, Brian Slattery is Jason Tatum.
I'm the guy who's helping him just to the bench. That's all I can do. No, I like this show a lot. I think it's really very, very good. It made such an impression on me that I almost considered getting a full face and scalp tattoo for Halloween and for this episode. I kind of backed off that at the last second. But it's just such a compelling show because of the characters, which are fantastic, the performances, the dialogue, and there's the core of the plot is this biker gang war, but it's so much more than that. And it's a show that really has a lot of, I think, heft to it in terms of dealing with questions of loneliness and redemption. Can people ever really be redeemed? And, the family trauma, it follows these two guys, the FBI agent and the ex-biker gang guy, as parallel stories, and that they're going to intersect, and when they do, it's so good, and they just have such interesting connections with each other and conversations. I don't see how you can help but being drawn into it.
Yeah, Irene's writing down notes. That's how.
It's just a habit, a nervous habit.
Yeah,
correcting my grammar, probably.
Listening to Bill and also just thinking about this too. One of the reasons it's hard to do a log line for this show is there's a lot of complexity here. There are these parallel. There's a crime story that's happening, and there's at least two major, maybe three major family stories that are happening too, and they are inextricable from one another. And I think they kind of gain power from each other in a certain way rather than distracting from one another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the word that I would have added to your list, Bill, would be moral ambiguity. Because that happens in all three of the stories. I also have to say that I also loved it, but at the same time, I got a little bit caught up in the plot. Like tangled in the plot. Like, wait, who's brother and whose uncle is this and who's and so
who Maeve is. I kept having to figure out who Maeve was over and over again.
It's all the face tattoos. They throw you off.
That's true. They're all the same type of guy, right? And But I was so caught up in their emotional, the characterization of each person. I felt like I got to know each person, even if I didn't know whose uncle he was or whatever. And I had a couple of times I went back, like, wait a minute. So how, that's why it was interesting to see the clip you played too, Colin, because it was, oh yeah, that made so much more sense now than it did in the very beginning when we were watching it. So there's a little bit of a tangle there that I got caught in, but other than that, I kind of agree. And I forgot what the question was.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So answering the questions is not the point of this show. It never has been.
Yeah.
So, but Jim, in a way, it's a two-hander. There is this kind of parallelism. There's this character, Robbie, kind of a depressed version of Omar Little from The Wire. He robs from the drug guys, but in a much more a much less vivacious
with a garbage
way.
truck.
Yeah, with a garbage truck, which takes some of the flair out of it right there. So there's him, and then there's Mark Ruffalo, who is an FBI agent, but he's a mess. There's been a family tragedy. He's the most depressed drinker ever. He's drinking vodka out of this big gulp plastic cup that he fills with ice every single night until he passes out. And they've actually detailed him to like handing out brochures on career day at high schools, and he's kind of dragged out of that. And I don't know about you, but at the beginning, this guy Tom Pelphrey, I think is his name, who plays Robbie, I thought he was going to steal the whole series. He's so riveting. I thought, he's going to take this thing away from Ruffalo. He's just more fun to watch. And then it also, I think by the end, it's Ruffalo's series. But
I think I agree. I like even the clip you played showed the sort of patience that Ruffalo had in this, where his big pauses, you could hear him thinking without him being dramatically thinking. I also think that, I don't know if he did this intentionally, I don't mean to insult him, but, he goes hard on the dad bod, which I think gives him authenticity in the way that, like, real teeth give British actor's authenticity. He had that. So dad bod equals British teeth somehow. I think he really stands out that way, but it's hard to stand out as an actor in this because they're all so well written and so inhabited.
Well, particularly if you've been the Hulk for a really long time,
Right,
and
right.
now you've got a dad bod, that's
Yeah.
an even bigger kind
So you're
of...
still eating like the Hulk, but now your job has
Yeah.
changed.
So, Bill, I did, and I think you did too. I cried at the end of this, and one of the things that I thought when I was crying at the end of the 7th episode is this is one of our forms of art these days, is that sort of 6 to 10 episode streaming drama or whatever. And so this is one of the kinds of art we have right now. This is a great example of how to do it and not have it be formula. But I'd like to hear some of your thoughts about that.
Yeah, you and I both cried because, we're sappy old men, or because we're drinking vodka from a big gulp all day, or both. But yeah, it is the strength of it is this it's an action series. There's a lot of tackling and punching and grabbing and beating but that's not at the core of it. What makes it so great, I think, is the ambitions beyond that. The other thing about Tom Ruffalo's character that I think is so interesting, he's an ex-priest. And I just think there's something that happens a lot in narratives. That's a common trope. There's something so interesting about the prefix ex when you put it in front of priest, because it just opens up so many questions. And he still is that person. He's still dealing with theological questions. And I just want to mention because it kind of demonstrates what the show is trying to do. Episode 6 is called Out Beyond Ideas of Wrongdoing and Right Doing, There is a River. And I thought, that's really interesting. Well, you've given me license to do this because of your Out-in thing. That's actually taken from a poem by Rumi, of the 13th century Persian poet, who his poem is, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. And that just gives you sort of an idea of the other things that this show is trying to do and what it's reaching for, I think, really successfully.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say that's connected to, first of all, good research there, Bill. The way the show uses nature.
Yes.
And
and water, right?
Water and the river.
And birds. Birds are really big.
And flashbacks to the golden time when we just went down to the watering hole and we jumped in, and it was so much fun.
Which is also so religious, too, at the same time.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's also one of the things that is repeated is Robbie's thing that is obviously a metaphor where he says, if you're going to jump into cold water, your heart could burst. So you take some cold water and you spread it around your body first. You have a reaction to that?
I think the editing was really brilliant in this because it's not gimmicky, but it's I hate to even use the word clever. It's just brilliant. Especially there'd be like a particularly violent scene followed by pictures of a blue heron just walking on the mud flat.
I worked with that blue heron too. He's a total professional.
He's a union. He's a union guy.
Yeah. We should talk a little bit. I'd like to hear all three of you because it's interesting. It is this sort of two-hander involving these two guys, but there's also, I think, another super important role is this young woman. Her name is Maeve. She's played by the British actress Amelia Jones, and Irene. I don't know. There's a stillness in her. She's in this incredibly chaotic situation, not of her making. And there's something that she contributes to this whole 7-part series that I have a hard time describing, but you'll be able to.
Well, her acting, because I agree about a stillness, because you know what she's thinking when she doesn't say anything. Her face is so expressive, and she's just she just wants to have a good life. She just wants people to be happy. She wants to be happy. And she's caught in this thing, and she's trying to do the right thing, but she's confused about what the right thing is. And she struggles, but she's just so likable and pretty and wonderful. And you just feel like, go out into the world and do what you really want to do. But can't in a lot of ways because she's, all tangled up and trying to do the right thing. And so she's a beautiful character. I think it's interesting the women on the outskirts of all this male stuff we've been talking about so far are very interesting, and they're participating, but they're not, and they want to help, but they're not sure. And so that's one of the moral ambiguities they feel.
Yeah, I think anybody want to react to that? Or you want to do a little Maeve thing?
Two things. It's almost like Taylor Sheridan kind of thing, but with big feelings. I like it much more. The other is the employment of the Delco accent that we have to, at some point, talk about Keokenatao, because I have video here that I'm going to send to all of you after with an instructional tutorial.
Can you do it?
I can't do it very well. I can say Keokenatao and water.
You can say water.
I mean, what's really amazing is that several of the actors who have to master the Delco accent are from the British Isles somewhere. The actor who plays Lizzie, one of the members of the task force, is Irish. She's going to be in Wuthering Heights, the Emerald Fennell version of Wuthering Heights coming up. And then two of the actors, the actor who plays Grasso and then Amelia Jones, who plays Maeve, are British. So they not only have to do American accents, but then they have to do adult. And they did that. They had a dialect coach on the set. And I was telling you guys beforehand that Tom Pelfrey, he figured out that there was the boyfriend of some woman who worked on the set who had a really good Delco accent, and he would just talk football with that guy every day for about an hour until he really kind of picked up the sound of it. Bill, I want to go back to the idea of Ruffalo as a priest, because you brought that up. And there's that wonderful moment where one of the characters, I won't say who, says to him, "Aren't you going to give me penance?" And Ruffalo goes, "I never gave anybody penance because people beat themselves up enough as it is." And then he said, "And that's my secret. I'm always angry." No, that's the Hulk. But but I don't know what Ruffalo's doing with all that is really interesting too, and what Inglesby's doing with it.
Yeah, I took note of that too. That was another. There's so many great moments in the show. It's not just the performances. It's really scripted really well. And I had read that Ruffalo was not like the original choice for that character. But
Cruise.
It was Carrot Top.
I was going to say Carrot.
It was Beetlejuice guy. I'm drawing a blank.
Michael Keaton.
But yeah. But I like Ruffalo's perfect in it. His slumped over appearance and him carrying the weight of the world, and he's just so good at that. And just to go back to Maeve for just 1 second, she is so vital to all of this. And in terms of like the acting and the scripting, she's got this one moment when she says to Robbie, her uncle, "What have you done to us?" And it's just 6 one-syllable words, but you never want anyone to say that to you, right? And it just carried so much weight for me. And it's another one of those moments that shows just how the combination of the characterizations, the scripting, and then the actors, embodying all of that, it works so well.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, everybody in this is written so well and is inhabited so well. A little bit, though, I would say that the bikers could be a little cartoony.
A little flatter at times. So, it does try to show some depth to them.
I'm not saying they
but
didn't
you're
do
right.
it at all.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about any great performances by the Dark Arts.
You don't think so? I think the guy who plays Perry is actually...
But mostly he's given that look.
Yeah.
He's amazing. But I just wanted to say something also about the priest thing, because I think, the idea that you have to save everyone, he wants to save people. He thinks that's what motivates him. And then he has a very interesting conversation toward the end with somebody about just that whole thing, about what does it mean to save somebody? How can you save somebody, and all that, in a way that I thought was really interesting, because that's a big part of his character. Like, oh yeah, I'm just here to help, which is like a priestly kind of thing.
I don't know whether it's the same thing or not, and I don't want to do any spoiling. But there's near the end, there's a kind of a plot line where it seems like he is going to save another person, and then he decides the way that I will save this person is to let this person go.
That's what you're talking somebody about. Says to him.
Yeah, and I thought that was. I mean, the last thing I would say about this is, and I don't mean to. I don't know. I guess he's sound stupid when you say this about anything, but there's something very Shakespearean about this whole thing. It's these
There-
kind of
no,
warring,
you're right.
warring
You're right.
houses, kind of a complicated plot, a lot of betrayals going on. There's just sort of a lot, in the way that there's a lot in Shakespeare.
I was thinking that too.
Yeah.
I wrote down as a descriptor that it was thick last night.
Yes.
Because it's just so many layers that it doesn't quit.
Yeah. Well, we should probably wrap it up there. It's on HBO. If we didn't do that part, it's on HBO. I think all of us feel it's very, very much worth watching. We hope that Brad Ingalls will be. I hope that there's like a third leg of the trilogy.
Yeah, like a Taylor Sheridan thing.
Yeah, but like it won't be Mayor of Easttown, and it won't be this. It'll be a whole new thing.
But it will have a Delco accent.
It'll have Delco accents. Yeah,
Accent.
We have that to live for anyway. All right, we're going to take a little break. We're going to come back. We're going to make some recommendations. Time to say a few thank yous, starting with the maestro Dylan Reyes. And it's a little bit more technically interesting here. By the way, this is going to be, I think, on YouTube also as well. Go to Connecticut Public Channel on YouTube, and you'll see all these wonderful people. And we also want to thank Jonathan McPants, the producer of this episode and most episodes of The Nose. Thanks also to Robin Doyen Aiken for getting us through another week as our boss. All right, so it is time to make some recommendations here, and I think we have time. We've got at least 4 people making recommendations. Who should go? Well, Brian Slattery, we haven't heard your voice in a while. Brian Slattery, you go first.
Okay. So very much in keeping with the day, and some fun pop culture news. So this director, this is a kill 2 birds with 1 stone thing too, I realized too. So this director named Jane Schoenbrunn, I hope I got that right, who has directed We're All Going to the World's Fair, and I saw the TV Glow has gotten the green light to try to adapt the 90s comic book series Black Hole into a miniseries. This is a great time to recommend Black Hole, as maybe it would be in my sort of like top 5 pieces of media ever, believe it or not. It's a very difficult graphic novel to describe, but it's sort of like a comic book. And it makes it an amazing thing to think about how you would even do it in another medium. But if anybody's equipped for the task, it might be Jane Schoenbrunn, and this is a good time to recommend I Saw the TV Glow, which is the most recent movie that she made. Both of them seasonally appropriate, both of them really terrific things.
Bill Usman was nodding emphatically about the Black Hole, right? All right.
Yeah, jeez.
Okay. Since you were nodding, you go next.
I'm also doing Halloweeny, 2 television shows, both by the same creator, Mike Flanagan. The Haunting of Hill House from 2018, which was sort of loosely based on the great Shirley Jackson novel. And then The Haunting of Bly Manor in 2020, which draws on The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, but also alludes to a lot of other James stories. And they share some of the same performers. I really enjoyed them both when they first premiered, and they're kind of sort of little perfect Halloween viewing.
All right. Jim Jopdelane.
I will confess I'm totally unprepared for this moment, but here I go. We recently went up to Deerfield and saw the great guitarist Julian Lage, and I think everybody needs to see him while he's touring as a solo act. He just comes out with his acoustic guitar and invents things right in front of your eyes. It's pretty miraculous.
I will say Dylan Reyes, our technical producer, is getting very excited in capital letters on my Slack feed right now.
Then
So he's with you.
Let's see if he's as excited about my recommendation of The Beths, the New Zealand pop band. I've seen them a couple of times. I think they're going to blow up, so get to them before they blow up. And, of course, Slow Horses, which there's 1 episode left for me.
Yes. We're about to close out Slow Horses too as well. It's been a joy. Irene?
Yeah, I would.
You got lots of
agree
time
with
if you
that.
need it.
Okay. Yeah, Slow Horses, yes. But I've just happened to have watched 2 international shows on Netflix that are both really interesting because they're fueled by really good acting and really good characterization, not necessarily the plot. The plot is kind of more complicated in both of them, but one of them is Danish, The Asset. which is it's very dark and it's not a feel-good show, but the acting is really interesting and so are the characters, and so I recommend it. Another one is from Mexico. It's called No One Saw Us Leave, which is based on a true story, and it's kind of a wacky story, but it's got all these, again, wonderful acting, kind of very absorbing about this couple in the 60s and their children. So I would recommend that too. It's called No One Saw Us Leave.
All right, those are good recommendations. I'll just quickly say that since Jim talked about that, but the Beths, which Dylan also agreed about, one group this guy I've been very interested in lately is Folk Bitch Trio, which has a little bit of that same sound. And of course, I'm With Her. I want to get to an I'm With Her concert. I mean, I really want to. They're sort of like the Beatles now for me, because they all have kind of a distinct sounds and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think Dylan's also into I'm With Her. So, and the Beths as well. So I was thinking about Catherine Bigelow, and yeah, I did struggle with Zero Dark 30. And I just also, when The Hurt Locker won Best Picture that year, I thought, really? But for a slightly less elevated taste, one of her earlier movies, I think it's 1991, is the movie Point Break. Point Break, in which it has everything, as Stefan would say. It has Gary Busey.
It has everything.
That's right. It has Gary Busey, so right away you've got almost everything because you got Gary Busey. But it's Keanu Reeves as an young FBI agent who, and as Pence pointed out, this is kind of a Halloween recommendation because he infiltrates a gang of bank robbers who wear masks as and they're masks of presidents. So there's Reagan and Nixon but they are surfers also, and Patrick Swayze is the leader of this gang, and then this whole kind of very personal thing where you see these two guys, one of them's pursuing the other. It's not exactly like Heat, but they're kind of falling in love with each other in a certain way, in maybe a somewhat platonic way. And it's just, the scenery is gorgeous. And I mean, it's arguably a stupid movie, but it's a great, great stupid movie. And the other thing, I've never seen this, but they actually do something called Point Blank Live, where they do it on stage, and they bring somebody up from the audience to play Keanu Reeves' character, whose name is Johnny Utah, and they actually have the lines taped up around and everything like that, and he has to put on a wetsuit at one point or something. Anyway, I would love to see Point Blank Live. But another thing I love to see is the nose, and it's great to have everybody here in the studio. And so thanks very much to Irene Papoulis, Jim Chapdelaine, Bill Usman, Brian Francis Slattery. What a lot of fun this was. We'll be back next week with a bunch of new shows.
Across from St. Francis, past the conservatory, up the street from the seminary. You know, it's a very, very, very cool place to hang out. Yeah. It's cozy, like a Cracker Barrel. Yeah, we all be laughing, talking, joking, talking about this and talking about that. Talk about everything as a matter of fact. Oh, yeah. Talk about Torrington, Vernon, Danbury, Waterbury, Alderberry, Woodbury, hitting on New Britain, Vernon, I already said that one, Avon, Farmington. Yeah, 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 yeah. On the red.